Some weeks there just isn't a lot of retro console modding news, but this week is not one of those weeks. Let's start off by talking about this Sega Master System Model 2 RGB Video Bypass kit. I'm assuming that there have been other RGB bypass kits for the Sega Master System, but I am interested in the actual mount that mounts it to the PCB. I talked a couple of weeks ago about the Sega Genesis Model 1 sort of bracket. This is sort of a good demonstration of how those Model 2 mini DINs can mount to these boards. Instead of having to scrape the solder mask, you just solder the mini DIN onto this little bracket here. It's awesome to see that one person has an innovation that kind of quickly spreads to other consoles, and so it's awesome to see that other consoles are now going to get this cool new mount. Anthony from Linus Tech Tips talked about the Mr. Multisystem on Short Circuit this week. I think it's awesome that he went through the process of hand assembling this thing, putting the DE10 Nano in there, and kind of even stumbling on assembling the kit, but the Mr. Multisystem does look like a really cool layout for the board. Now, I have nothing against Mr. Add-on's aluminum case here, but it kind of stays true to the DE10 Nano's original form factor, whereas the Mr. Multisystem kind of goes crazy. It makes it a little bit of a wider footprint, but it's able to spread the I/O out on all one side of the board versus the Mr. Add-on's Mr. case here. Everything is kind of all over the place. Like I said, I don't really have anything wrong with this kit, and I really like mine, but it's nice to see some of these newer Mr. systems that are just a better configuration for usability. Not to mention the fact that this is huge for Mr. I know that Short Circuit is only, I guess it has a lot of subscribers, 1.65 million, but this is good exposure for Mr. Again, just kind of getting the word out, and people that might have been against this sort of form factor with ports all over the place, they might be dragged into Mr. now that it has this interesting, I would say a little bit more modern form factor. Speaking of Mr., here's another mini ITX MiSTerkiste board. I don't really know how to pronounce it, but it really kind of blew up on Twitter. I got a bunch of likes the other day. Here's a picture of the MiSTerkiste, I'm gonna call it MiSTerkiste because that sounds cool, in a small form factor ITX case. And here's a picture of the I/O in the back, so it looks like it's got a ton of different ports. And again, everything is all on the one side, so it might be more convenient for people to kind of put in their home theater entertainment centers so they don't have ports coming out every side. Anyways, not sure of pricing for this MiSTerkiste kit, but it's going to be another awesome option for people who want this sort of mini ITX form factor for their Mr. More and more Mr. news, we actually have the second PS1 Mr. Core being released on Discord. Asm FPG, who I've been talking about for the last few weeks, has been doing a bunch of add-ons for this first Mr. Core. He left developing this PS1 Mr. Core for a while. I got them confused with this Laxar 3A, who I thought picked up that project and continued on, but it sounds like maybe they had just started their own project, and now it's finally being released. I say finally because this is sort of an early iteration of it. They replied in a comment that there's still a lot of work to be done. Sounds like there's no audio in this release, and loading from CD-ROM is still primitive. And it's interesting to note that this is not actually using the Mr. framework. This is using the same DE10 Nano hardware, but it's actually not using the Mr. framework. They said that it can be ported over to Mr., but right now it's not going to be integrated with Mr., the Mr. framework that everybody has been using so far on their DE10 Nanos. I'm excited to see more from both of these PS1 Mr. Cores because this sort of 3D on Mr. is super exciting for anybody who's cared about Mr. for the last few years, I guess. Now we're going to move on to some N64 news. The mod shop here on Twitter announced that they created an FRAM memory card mod. I could have sworn somebody else had done this too, but this is an open source project for you to create your own PCB and solder on one of these FRAM chips, and basically you can make your own N64 memory pack. So that's really interesting. The Gerber is available here on the GitHub. You can create one yourself if you'd like. And for those who are wondering, the FRAM means that this can save files without the use of a battery. That's pretty cool. You won't have to worry about changing a battery sometime in the future. Reventlo, I think that's how you pronounce it, has been sharing a lot about his N64jr 3D printed case on Twitter lately. This is an entirely 3D printed N64 case where you can drop the N64 PCB inside of it, and it kind of gives it a lot smaller of a footprint. If you go on their Twitter, you can see that there's just a ton of pictures of it mounted in the case here, different stages of development, so it's really cool to be able to see the progress of this N64jr case. The other cool thing is because it's 3D printed, there's really no such thing as no cut for this thing because you can literally print different options. Let's say you're doing an HDMI mod, and even Bordy's new mod that has the full-size HDMI, you won't have to worry about cutting this case because you could just print it. Maybe there's going to be different options for different board sizes, but you won't have to worry about cutting the case and damaging the original N64. I don't think it's been released to the public yet, and I'm not sure if they're going to be offering them for sale, so we'll have to wait and see how this project turns out, and I'm going to keep following it and let you guys know when it finally does come out where you can get it or buy it. There's actually more from Reventlo. This is actually a BlueRetro mount, so you can mount the ESP32 that is used for the BlueRetro Bluetooth receiving inside of the N64 case on the screw on the heatsink. I can imagine that you're not going to want to print this thing with PLA or some other kind of low temperature filament, but maybe if you've got PETG or some other high temp filament, you can print one of those things, and it looks like it's very easy to install the BlueRetro inside the console instead of having it dangle outside. Now, I have some reservations about this. It kind of seems like it sits inside of the heatsink here, so I don't know if that's going to inhibit any of the Bluetooth functionality. And also, I did have some issues with my BlueRetro where I had to actually fiddle with it a little bit. So sometimes when I had my Ultra HDMI plugged in, the BlueRetro wouldn't power on, and so I didn't have any controllers, and I had to actually mess with the console, power it off and on again, and not having it outside and being able to unplug it completely might be sort of a hindrance. And also Darth Cloud mentioned that if you want to sort of swap between wired functionality and using the BlueRetro, you're also going to need to wire up a switch to the ESP32 to turn that off. So if you want to use BlueRetro, you can turn the ESP32 on, but then when you want to use your wired controllers, you could just turn that off. So that's not something that has been developed yet, but that's a theoretical thing that could happen in the future to make a sort of internal wireless mod for your N64. Now, speaking of new cases for old consoles, I've been following this Xbox Mini. It's a private Facebook group, but I've been following them kind of all across the internet for a while now. Their username is Shingotetsu, I think. But anyways, they've been sort of posting in different places, this is on Reddit, these Xbox Mini consoles. Here's some better pictures of both this Xbox Mini on the left and the Xbox Slim on the right. Essentially, take the original Xbox motherboard outside of the Xbox's shell and kind of do away with all the extraneous things. So the DVD drive is gone, the large hard drive is gone, so I think it would just be a laptop size hard drive. We can actually look at a feature list here. So it says mainboard without the DVD-ROM, hard drive is a laptop size one with an IDE to SATA converter, space for an internal OGX360, which I've been meaning to look at that project too. It's I think a Bluetooth adapter for the original Xbox, so you can connect wireless controllers to it. Zerk, I don't know what that is, but they mentioned that you can turn the console off and on with the original DVD remote. That's interesting. And they swap out the original Xbox's power supply with a Pico-style PSU to ATX converter for the Xbox. So basically you use an external AC adapter, kind of like the Xbox 360. I think this case was originally designed to be injection molded, but I can't imagine you wouldn't be able to 3D print one of these yourself and maybe get a piece of acrylic cut out for the top so you'd be able to see right into this thing. That would be awesome. I mean, this is a really awesome project. Last but not least, let's finish up with the Panda GameCube controller. This is a Kickstarter that absolutely destroyed its goal. I mean, it's already at $1 million, and the original pledge was only 100,000. This controller is definitely super overkill for almost anybody, but maybe like professional Smash Brothers tournament players. But if you've ever used something like the Xbox One Elite controller, you know right away the difference a premium controller has to your gameplay. It's kind of night and day difference, and you almost don't really want to play with non-premium controllers anymore. So even though there's things like upgraded stick boxes, additional buttons, customizable triggers, tactile D-pads, better buttons, customizable faceplate, most of that stuff won't really matter to the average Joe other than it just looks and feels really nice. So by default, it has a USB port here, but I think it's really just USB to GameCube. So you could plug it right into a GameCube or a Switch if you have that GameCube to Switch adapter. Maybe it would even work with a PC, but there isn't any built-in wireless in the base model. And the base model is, right now the base controller is $90. We could check out the add-ons. So there's things like Pro Shells. I don't really know what this is. There's no good pictures of it in the description there, or maybe they're mixed in with the other parts of the Kickstarter. But the thing that is important to see here is the wireless pack. So yes, there will be a Bluetooth wireless kit, but it's an extra $30. And the good part about it being Bluetooth is you could actually use it with BlueRetro again. BlueRetro has a GameCube mode where you could wire up the BlueRetro a little bit differently, and you can use Bluetooth controllers with a GameCube. So that basically makes this a $120 WaveBird replacement, which if you haven't seen the used prices for WaveBirds, it's $75 right now. So a used WaveBird compared to one of these brand new controllers, it probably is no contest. But for $120, I'm really on the fence of whether or not I should back this project. On one hand, I need money. On the other hand, it's nice for you guys to see this project, and it would give me sort of an excuse to make a BlueRetro for the GameCube. What do you think about this project? Do you think I should get one and show you guys how to do a BlueRetro, or should I save my money? That's it for this week. If you want to suggest a news story to me, hit me up on Twitter, or you should really come join the Discord. It's an awesome place. There's an awesome community there. People around all the time to talk about issues with your mods and just kind of talk just general retro modding stuff. I wouldn't be able to do these weekly videos without those guys on Discord. I really appreciate them so much. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.